He thought it was over. After her betrayal nearly destroyed their marriage, he was ready to let go of the past. But when she came home from another date and saw his reaction, her heart was trapped. What happened when he learned that she was still in contact with her lover? Revenge or forgiveness? Only in the end will you find out if she can regain his trust, or if it's already hopeless. I never thought that one day she would stand before me, all in tears, begging me not to leave her. But here she is, Laura, the woman I dedicated my whole life to, with eyes filled with panic, and I look at her and feel only cold emptiness. Once, I would have torn anyone apart for her, but now I don't even need to touch her. Her world is already crumbling. She doesn't know that I know, but she knows something has changed. It all started almost imperceptibly. Laura had always been beautiful, not in that cheap way where a woman is just well-groomed or knows how to dress well. She had that magic that made people look at her longer than they should. She worked as a secretary at a law firm, and I knew that her bosses were pleased with more than just her typing skills or organizing documents. But I never doubted her. We had been married for 7 years. Long enough to know what coffee she preferred, but not long enough to get tired of each other. We didn't have kids, but we were planning to, or at least I thought we were. The first warning bells rang when she started spending more time at work. "My boss is making me stay past 6 again," she sighed, taking off her heels by the door. "Is that even legal?" I joked. She curled her lips into a smile. "It's business, darling. I'm indispensable." At the time, I thought it flattered her. She liked feeling important. But then she started to distance herself. Something changed in the way she came home. She used to hug me at the door, laugh, and tell me about how someone at the office had embarrassed themselves at a meeting or how the new intern had irritated her. But now, she came into the apartment silently, barely kissed me on the cheek, and immediately went to the bathroom. And then there was the phone. I was never one to dig through other people's messages, but Laura started treating her phone as if it held nuclear codes. It was always lying screen down. If it rang, she grabbed it first, even when we were just watching a movie. "You've become so closed off," I said one evening at dinner. "What?" She looked up from her plate. "I don't know. It feels like you're hiding something from me." For a moment, fear flashed in her eyes. Just a second, but that was enough. "Bruce, don't make things up," she laughed. But her laughter was empty. Just a lot of work. I didn't say anything at the time, but suspicion settled in me. The following week, I decided to pick her up from the office. It was unexpected. She didn't know I was coming. I parked the car near her building and waited. It was already 7:30, and the office was almost empty. And there she was. She wasn't alone. Her boss, Richard Stanford, was walking beside her, leaning in closer to her than was acceptable. He said something, and Laura laughed. But not like she laughed with me. It was that special laugh women save for men they want to impress. I gripped the steering wheel so hard that my fingers turned white. They said their goodbyes, and she got into her car. I expected her to leave immediately, but she sat there for another minute, looking at her phone. She smiled, wrote something. I didn't drive home right away. I went to a bar. Then the evidence started showing up. No one comes home smelling like someone else's perfume for no reason. No one buys new expensive lingerie if nothing has changed in their life. And definitely no one refuses sex with their own husband without a reason. I knew, but I needed the facts. I found them by accident. Laura had forgotten her laptop at home. It was that morning when she was in a rush and ran out of the apartment so fast that she didn't even notice. I took a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and just stared at it. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to be that guy, digging through his wife's things, looking for something dirty. But damn it, I already felt everything. When I opened the laptop, it wasn't locked. I clicked on the browser. The tabs were still open. Email. And one of the messages was from Richard Stanford. "I miss you. Yesterday was incredible. I can't wait to see you in that red dress again." The red dress. The one I bought her a year ago. The one she said she'd save for a special occasion. The silence in the apartment became suffocating. I sat there, looking at those words, feeling something inside me break. But the worst part wasn't that. The worst part was that I wasn't even surprised. I closed the laptop, took a sip of the cold coffee, and realized I needed to know everything. I didn't just want to know about the betrayal. I wanted to know how far it had gone. And I found someone who could help me. I sat in the car, watching her walk out of the hotel, and for the first time in all this time, I felt something other than pain. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something more. A lie I had believed for months, maybe even years. She had deceived me, lied to me, ingratiated herself with me, and now I didn't even want to talk to her. I wanted her to pay. But first, I wanted to know everything. I found someone who could help me. Andrew Clark was a private investigator. Not the cheap kind who films people walking out of hotels on their phones. He worked hard, precise, and always got to the truth. I stumbled upon his name by accident, in a bar, while I was drinking whiskey, trying to pretend I wasn't thinking about Laura. If you want to know the truth, the bartender told me then, find Clark. And now, I sat in a small office with a worn-out carpet, listening as he told me about my own wife. She meets him 2 or 3 times a week, Clark said, flipping through the pictures. Most often after work. Always the same hotel. I looked at the photo. Laura, my wife. She was standing by the entrance, smiling. Her boss, Richard Stanford, was touching her hand. I felt sick. Is that it? My voice sounded hoarse. Clark looked at me closely. Is that what you wanted to find? I didn't know how to respond. Instead, I just took the photos and went home. I didn't want to see her. Didn't want to talk. I wanted to act. The next few days, I stayed quiet. I watched. I listened. Laura acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me in the morning, said, I love you. See you tonight. And every time, I gritted my teeth, forcing myself not to reveal that I knew the truth. I thought she was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But I was wrong. Everything changed that day when I came home early. Laura wasn't there yet, but on the kitchen table was an envelope, yellowish, with my name on it. I opened it and read the first line. Bruce, I should have told you a long time ago. There's something you need to know. I frowned. At the bottom was a name I didn't recognize. Emily. I put the sheet down and took another one out of the envelope. It was a document. A birth certificate. I looked at the father's name. Not mine. I read it 3 times. Laura had a child. A child I knew nothing about. A child from another man. She returned home when I was still sitting at the kitchen table, holding the document. Bruce? Her voice sounded surprised. You're home so early? I looked up. Who is Emily? She froze. A second, 2, and suddenly I saw it fear. Where did you? Answer me. She swallowed. It's my daughter. Something exploded in my head. You mean you have a child and you never told me about it? She closed her eyes. I was scared. I laughed. It was a harsh, bitter laugh. Scared? Scared of what, Laura? That I'd find out what a liar you are. She didn't respond. I held up the document. Who is her father? She didn't answer right away. And then I understood. It's Stanford, isn't it? Her silence spoke louder than any words. I threw the papers on the table. My God. Laura stepped closer. Bruce, I'll explain everything. No need. I walked past her, grabbed the keys. Where are you going? Panic in her voice. I turned around. Out for some fresh air. If I stay here for another minute, I'll do something I'll regret. Her face went pale, and I just closed the door behind me. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. She had no idea that this was the last night I looked at her without disgust. When I came back home, Laura was sitting in the living room, clutching her phone in her hands. Her eyes were red, her face tense. She was waiting, and maybe hoping I'd change my mind. I hadn't. You need to explain to me. My voice was steady, but cold. Bruce, she stood up, tried to take my hand, but I stepped back. Sit down, Laura. Speak. She nervously swallowed and slowly sat down. I remained standing, arms crossed over my chest. I was young. I made a mistake. Young? When did you have this child? 6 years ago. Something in my head seemed to snap. 6 years. That meant that when we got married, when she talked about family, when we planned to have children, she already had a daughter. She'd been lying to me from day one. And you never thought to tell me? I was scared. Scared of what? That you would leave. I laughed. It was a harsh, joyless laugh. You thought that if you told the truth, I'd leave, so you decided to lie your whole life? Laura pressed her lips together, looked away. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. You kept your own child from me. You dragged me on trips, talked about our future, made me feel guilty when I hinted that I wanted kids, while all this time. It's not like that. She jumped up, her eyes shining with tears. I wanted to be with you. So you slept with your boss? Her face twisted. Who told you? You gave me all the clues. I just put them together. Laura pressed her hands to her face, crying silently. For the first time in all this time, I saw her as weak. She was no longer that confident woman who would come home and kiss me automatically, thinking I'd never figure it out. She was cornered. And now what? She whispered, looking up at me. You'll tell me the truth. All the dirt. All the details. She stayed silent, but I waited. Eventually, she gave in. Emily lives with Richard's mother. I couldn't raise her. But you could lie to me about her existence? Bruce, I couldn't control it. But you controlled your decision to sleep with him. She shuddered. It was a mistake. When did it start? 2 years ago. I clenched my fists, took a deep breath. 2 years of lies. And you were never going to stop? Laura trembled, as if looking for the right words, but I already knew them. No, she wouldn't have stopped. Not until I found out. Emily, she's going to live with us now. I looked up. What? Her grandmother is sick. Richard said he couldn't take care of her, and now? Now you want me to raise your lover's child? She tightly closed her eyes, as if she wanted to sink through the floor. I took a step back, looked at her with a long stare. She was scared of me, and rightly so. Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce. Laura jumped up. No, Bruce. You left me no choice. She rushed towards me, grabbed my shirt. Please. I know what I've done, but I love you. I pushed her away. You don't love anyone but yourself? Her lips trembled. She was trying to find something that could change my decision, but it was too late. I left the house, slamming the door, and never looked back. It was time to give her back what she had done to me. I stood in court, listening to her sobbing, and felt nothing but satisfaction. Laura had always been confident, clever, the kind who always got away unscathed. But now, she was different. Broken, trapped. And the worst part was that she had trapped herself. After that night, I didn't go home. I booked a hotel room and started acting. I could have just left, signed the papers, and forgotten about her. But that was too easy. She had played with me for years, lied to my face, turned me into an idiot. I wasn't going to just let her go. I met with a lawyer the next day. Do you just want a divorce, or? I want to destroy her. The lawyer raised an eyebrow, but quickly nodded. All right, let's talk strategy. I was ready to spend all my money just to make sure she ended up with nothing. She had betrayed me, humiliated me, and now I was going to do the same. Laura called dozens of times. I didn't answer. She sent messages. I deleted them. She even tried to reach me through my friends, but they all knew I didn't want to see her. I came back only when I knew she was almost broken. It was too late. Laura was sitting in the living room, crying, in the same sweatpants she wore when she was sick. Once, I would have cared. Once, I would have dropped everything to hold her. But not now. You came back, she whispered. Not for you. She looked up. Bruce, don't do this. I threw the papers on the table. Sign. She sniffled. Please. Sign. Laura flinched in fear. She took the pen, stared at the papers for a long time, and then something changed in her face. What if I refuse? I smiled. Then I'll do everything to make you lose everything you have. She nervously clenched her fingers. What do you want? I leaned in closer. You killed our future. Now, I'll kill yours. Laura signed. In court, she looked like she wanted to run away, but she couldn't. I took everything I could. The money, the apartment, even her car. She was left with nothing. When the judge read the decision, Laura looked up at me. Do you really hate me? I leaned in closer and whispered. You have no idea how much. That was the end. For her. But not for me. I still had one last blow to deliver. I thought it was the end. I thought I would never see her again. But 2 months after the divorce, Laura reappeared in my life and brought another lie with her. I moved to a new house, far from everything that reminded me of the past. I lived peacefully, worked, started rebuilding my life. Then she called. I didn't want to pick up, but something made me do it. Bruce, please listen to me. Her voice was broken, weak. What do you want? This is important. I was about to hang up, but she whispered something that made me freeze. It's about Emily. It felt like a shock to my system. What? Can we meet? I should have said no. I should have ignored her. But some strange sense of responsibility still lingered inside me. And I agreed. We met at a small cafe outside the city. Laura looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, nervous movements. She wasn't the woman I knew. Say it. I sat down across from her, not wasting time on pleasantries. Richard. He rejected Emily. She was gripping her cup as if she were afraid of dropping it. He said he no longer wanted anything to do with her. So what? She's left without a home. That's not my problem. Laura trembled. Bruce, I can't do this alone. So what do you want from me? She took a deep breath. I want you to help me raise her. I stared at her, thinking she would say it was a joke. Are you out of your mind? She's innocent. She hasn't done anything to you. She's the child of your lover. Laura pressed her lips together. I know I'm asking the impossible, but I really can't handle this alone. I should have gotten up and walked out. But instead, I asked, where is she now? Laura looked at me in surprise. She's in the car. I felt something tighten inside me. Bring her in. Laura ran out. A minute later, she came back, holding the hand of a little girl. Emily. She was a copy of Laura. Big eyes, light hair. She looked at me as if I could disappear at any moment. Hi. She smiled shyly. I didn't know what to say. And then I realized, it wasn't as simple as I thought. This wasn't just revenge. It was something more. It was a choice. And it affected more than just my life. I thought I could hate her. I thought I could just turn away and leave, leaving Laura with her problems. But when I looked into Emily's eyes, something changed. She hadn't asked for this life. She didn't choose her father, nor the lies her mother grew up with. She was just standing there in front of me, small, confused, and waiting for me to make the next move. Are you Bruce? Her voice was soft, timid. I nodded. Mom said you're a good guy. I looked at Laura, and she quickly looked away. She said that now? After everything? Laura pressed her lips together but didn't answer. I looked at Emily again. She was holding a stuffed bunny, her fingers nervously running over the fabric. I didn't know what to do. What do you want, Laura? My voice was harsh. She hesitated, sighed, and sat down across from me. I've lost everything. I was fired. I have almost no money. I've been looking for another job, but no one trusts me after the scandal with Richard. I can't handle this alone. And you want me what? To adopt her? She nervously licked her lips. No, just help. I didn't respond right away. Inside me, two opposing forces were raging. One shouted, tell them both to go to hell. She betrayed you. This isn't your child. The other, weaker one whispered, but it's not her fault. She's just a child. I got up. Get in the car. Laura looked up in surprise. What? I'll take you to my place. I don't know what will happen next, but you won't be out on the street. Emily smiled, but Laura still looked confused. Are you serious? I leaned in closer. Don't confuse this with forgiveness. She nodded, grabbed her daughter's hand, and they both walked to the car. Living together was strange. Emily quickly adapted, as if she had always lived here. She was curious, a bit talkative, and I saw something real in her. Laura, on the other hand, seemed to constantly wait for me to tell them to leave. She walked around the apartment quietly, never trying to irritate me. One evening, I found her in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, staring pensively out the window. Tomorrow I have an interview, she said quietly. Good. If they hire me, Emily and I will move. I didn't know why those words suddenly stung. Maybe it's for the best, I said. Laura nodded, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't understand. I thought this was the end. I thought they would leave and we'd never speak again. But everything changed that evening when the hospital called. Laura had been in an accident. I ran into the hospital, not understanding whether it was fear for her or anger that I even cared. Laura could have died, and the thought hit me harder than I expected. She was lying in a hospital bed, pale, with bruised arms. Emily was sitting by her, holding her mother's fingers. When I entered, the little girl rushed to me and tightly squeezed my hand. "Bruce, Mom's in a lot of pain." Her voice trembled. I felt something tighten inside me. "She'll be fine," I said, though I wasn't sure myself. The doctor came over and briefly explained the situation. Laura was on her way to the interview when another car cut her off. She lost control and crashed into a fence. A mild concussion, a few bruises, but overall, she was lucky. She opened her eyes. "Saw me. You came. Don't be glad." She tried to smile, but it came out pitiful. "You're always so kind." I grimaced. "Don't play the victim, Laura." "I'm not playing." She said it quietly, calmly. I looked at her, and for the first time, didn't see the woman who betrayed me. I saw a mother, holding on by the last thread of her strength. "You'll have to stay here a little longer, until you get back on your feet," I said coldly, without emotion. She nodded, and in her eyes, I saw something like relief. That same evening, when we got back home, my old friend Max called. We hadn't seen each other in months, not since my divorce. "Dude, you've disappeared." "I've been busy." "Let me guess. This somehow has to do with Laura?" I didn't answer, and he laughed. "Oh wow. So it's true. What do you want, Max?" "Let's have a drink." I hesitated, but eventually agreed. Max was the one who knew me better than anyone. We had been friends since college, and he always told me that Laura would betray me someday. He wasn't happy that he was right. "You still feel something for her," he said when we were sitting at the bar. "No. Liar." I took a sip of whiskey. You're still trying to save her." I looked at him, and he just shrugged. "It's your nature, Bruce. But think about it. Is she worth it?" I didn't have an answer. When I got home, Laura was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea. "Max?" she asked. "Yeah." She looked into her cup. "Did he convince you that I'm bad?" "You don't need Max for that." Laura smiled sadly. "If I could turn back time, I would." "Don't." I went to the bedroom, but her words stayed with me. The next morning, I noticed something had changed. Laura got a strange call. She spoke quietly, stepping out into the hallway, but I still heard. "No, I can't right now. This isn't the best time." "Yes, I understand. Please, just give me some time." I tensed up. When she came back, I was standing in the doorway. "Who was that?" She inhaled sharply. "No one." "Laura." She looked confused. "It's just an acquaintance." "What acquaintance?" She remained silent, and then I understood. "Richard?" She flinched, and that was enough. Anger surged through me. "You're still in touch with him?" "No. I didn't want to." "Damn it, Laura. He's threatening me." I froze. "What?" She clutched her head with her hands. "Bruce, he didn't just give up on Emily. He has problems. People he owes money to. They found out about me, and now he wants me to help him." "How?" "I don't know." She looked genuinely scared. I could feel the tension building inside me. "Laura, what did you do?" "Nothing. But they know I was his mistress in the past. They think I might know where he's hiding the money." I realized this was serious. "And what now?" "I don't know." I stared at her, angry, disappointed. But now this wasn't just my personal drama. It was getting dangerous, and I couldn't just stand aside. Suddenly, the door opened, and Bruce saw a familiar silhouette. It was Richard. "You thought it was over?" His voice sounded threatening. Bruce couldn't hold himself back. His heart was beating so fast it felt like it would leap out of his chest. Laura looked fearfully at Richard, her face twisted in despair. "What do you want, Richard?" Bruce stepped forward, trying to stay calm, although his nerves were on edge. Richard smiled, but his eyes were cold as ice. He took a step forward, stopping just inches away from Bruce. "What belongs to me?" he said. "I won't let you ruin everything." Bruce clenched his fists, ready for any outcome. He understood that this situation was much more complicated than just betrayal or revenge. He was part of a game where the stakes weren't just his own life, but Laura and Emily's too. Laura, standing nearby, suddenly stepped toward Bruce, grabbing his hand. "Bruce, please, don't listen to him. It's all because of me. I should have ended things with him a long time ago." Richard laughed. "Oh, you still don't get it, Laura? All you did was make it worse. Now I'll take what's mine. You, Bruce, have no say here." Bruce looked at Laura. In her eyes, there was despair, but also hope. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't looking for excuses. She was ready to face her fate. But was Bruce ready to accept her again? "You won't be able to do this," Bruce said, his voice calm but determined. "I've already made up my mind. Laura and Emily are staying here. You no longer have a say in their lives." Richard didn't answer. He just looked at him with such a gaze that Bruce realized. This man wasn't just threatening. He was ready to do anything to get what he wanted. And Bruce had no choice but to act. Quietly, like in a movie, Richard pulled a gun from his pocket. Bruce instantly yanked Laura behind him, shielding her from possible danger. Emily was standing in the corner of the room, her eyes wide with fear. All three hearts at that moment were beating in unison, like one big machine, ready to explode. "Are you serious?" Bruce pulled out his phone and quickly pressed a few buttons. Richard didn't notice, but Bruce had already called the police. "I'm not afraid of you, Richard," Bruce said, looking again into the eyes of the man with the gun. "If you don't get out of here, I'll stop you." Richard smiled and took a step forward, but just then, a police voice came from behind the door. "Surrender. This is your last chance." Richard froze. He hadn't expected Bruce to be so decisive and prepared. Richard cursed under his breath, and, leaving the gun on the table, he headed for the door. Bruce glanced at Laura one more time. She flinched, but her gaze was calm, slightly grateful. She had already understood. Their journey wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. And although Richard was arrested, Bruce knew that the fight wasn't finished yet. They still had to reclaim everything they had lost. But one thing was certain. Now he wasn't afraid to face the future. How would you react if you found out your wife was still in contact with her ex, even after everything that's happened? Share your thoughts in the comments.